I think there are two key challenges facing by Indonesians or by the industries particularly. The first one is because what the market demands and what is supplied by the market, there's a gap there. And secondly, we can also see that there's a lot of the new graduates or the newly hired is not meeting the industry standard. They're not yet industry ready. So this leaves a big gap in the industries because they need to retrain those people that they just recruited because it's just not meeting the requirement that the businesses requires, but whether it's the soft skill or the hard skill that is required.
One of the challenges then is to find delivery models that can be done in Indonesia that meet the market needs. I guess we're talking about lower cost, talking about more accessible. Indonesia is a huge country with thousands of islands and people all over the country, so technology is an important factor in getting our products out there. So we need to be flexible and nimble and come up with new delivery models.
You're listening to the Katalis Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 4th season of the Katalis Podcast, produced by the IA-CEPA Economic Cooperation Program Katalis in Jakarta. I'm Sondang Sirait and I'm here with my co-host, Robbie Gaspar. This season we'll be discussing investments in key sectors between Indonesia and Australia. In this episode, we're looking at upskilling and its role in the future of work. Robbie, if you look at the stats, you'll see why this is an important topic. According to Statistics Indonesia, in 2024, almost 10 million Gen Z Indonesians, who are people born in the late 1990s and the first decade of this century, were unemployed and not enrolled in any education or training. That's 1 in 7 of all Gen Z Indonesians. There's also the growing demand among employers for qualifications and skills that many Gen Zers simply don't have.
That's true, Sondang. Many businesses, particularly those in services that rely heavily on technological expertise, like coding, data analytics, and others that support automation. Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia and is aiming to become a leader in the digital economy by 2030. So there's a real push to improve digital infrastructure, skills, data flow, and personal data protection. And that means we need a savvy workforce. In 2019, McKinsey predicted that 23 million jobs in Indonesia could be displaced by automation. However, it's not all doom and gloom. The same report also pointed out that a lot more new jobs could be created by 2030, in the range of 27 to 46 million. The issue is how to ensure the workforce is ready to take on these new types of jobs.
Exactly. So a good place to start would be to use digital training platforms that bring global expertise to the local market, adapting to local needs and even language. That's something that the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform seeks to do as an innovative tool to connect Indonesian businesses with Australian education providers. Now, if you're wondering how to access this platform, it's available at IA-skills.org. And we're going to explore this platform further in today's episode.
Sondang, we're very happy to be joined by two guests who are not only experts on education, but have also been directly involved in this exciting initiative. Ibu Devi Ariyani is the Executive Director of Indonesia Services Dialogue Council, an independent council that focuses on policy and regulatory reforms to develop Indonesia's services sectors and promote dialogue between government, the private sector, and research institutions. Tim Gilbert is the Vice President, International Development and International Partnerships at Melbourne Polytechnic, the largest provider of primary industry training in Victoria and one of the largest in Australia with a diverse range of courses.
Welcome, Ibu Devi and Tim, to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. So I'll start, Ibu Devi, with you. Something close to home. My nephew is graduating from high school this year. So this is a busy time for him and his parents as he applies for universities. Now, actually, millions of parents all over Indonesia are in the same shoes. They're trying to find the right major, the right school, to support their children's academic interests, but also ensure good job prospects. And as I watch them, I'm reminded by the hundreds of thousands of university graduates struggling to find work or who are working in jobs that are not really their field. What do you think is behind this growing issue?
I think there are two key challenges facing by Indonesians or by the industries particularly. The first one is because the what the market demands and what is supplied by the market, there's a gap there. And secondly, we can also see that there's a lot of the new graduates or the newly hired is not meeting the industry standard. They're not yet industry ready. So this leaves a big gap in the industries because they need to retrain those peoples that they just recruited because it's just not meeting the requirement that the businesses requires, but whether it's the soft skill or the hard skill that is required.
Ibu Devi, I understand the government of Indonesia is implementing strategies to address the gap between existing workforce skills and what the market really wants. Could you walk us through what has been done and what is underway by the government and with the private sector?
Yeah, so the government has launched several initiative programs with regards to bridging this gap. They're inviting a lot of private sectors to collaborate and develop some curriculums. They're also inviting the new graduates or Indonesian workforce to apply for certain vocational skills. And the government is working with the private sectors in trying to launch all these program initiatives. I think there are more than 10 digital startups that has been engaged by the government in order to provide this kind of vocational trainings. However, because of the massive needs of the digital startup as well as the industries in particular, they're still lacking in terms of meeting the industry requirement. And a lot of industries are building their own training programs, building their own training schools and training initiatives because of the like what's available in the market. So this is the day-to-day issues that is faced by the private sectors because of the lack of critical talent that they need.
I want to just pick up on what you said. A common understanding of vocational training in Indonesia is in the context of the government providing social protection, hence the government initiatives that you mentioned. How do we expand that thinking to get the private sector more involved than they are now?
Yeah, I think the government needs to further engage the first is they need to further engage the private sectors in terms of updating what is actually needed by the private sectors, because the job requirements and the job market always evolve, and with the dynamic changing environment, the requirement and the skills required is also evolving as the business model is evolving. The technology keeps on innovating. I think the further engagement by the private sector with the private sectors, as well as how the private sectors can also participate in terms of developing the models, developing the curriculums, and also probably sharing the type of model that they have with what the government already develops. Then it is kind of bridging the gap and closing the gap that currently is there in the market.
And this is the perfect segue to go with Tim. So if you don't mind, Tim, education is undoubtedly a major Australian services export to Indonesia. But if you look at the market here, it is quite crowded, with many other countries offering their services to Indonesians and many foreign institutions with offshore presence and very active marketing here. What makes the Australian education or training stand out?
That's a great question. And I think, when we're talking about Australian education, trust is one of the, most important factors. Even in Indonesian government circles, you've got a large number of government staff that have had their training in Australia under the Colombo Plan and so forth. And they trust the Australian education system. And you have Indonesian, the youth, a lot of them do want to come to Australia, or they want to receive Australian training, and that brand recognition, and I represent, I guess, the TAFE sector in Australia as well. And so, I think we've got a very robust vocational education system, and if we can find ways to impart that in Indonesia, that will be very well trusted by the parents and their children. And so I guess one of the challenges then is to find delivery models that can be done in Indonesia that meet the market needs. I guess we're talking about lower cost, talking about more accessible. Indonesia is a huge country with thousands of islands and people all over the country. So technology is an important factor in getting our products out there. So we need to be flexible and nimble and come up with new delivery models.
So, Tim, another question for you. Indonesia is aiming to create a much larger digital talent pool within the next decade, and this definitely needs wider upskilling efforts. That's something Australia is globally known for, especially in the context of utilising AI and automation. How will Australian education and trading help Indonesians take advantage of all this new technology?
Yeah, so I think the number was mentioned, 9 million or so workers are needed to be upskilled with digital literacy in Indonesia. And, that's a massive challenge. And you're not going to do that by charging Australian tuition fees. It just isn't going to happen. But also, many of these workers, or most of them, are not going to actually need to be experts in cybersecurity or experts in AI. They need the basic digital literacy so that they can work alongside these systems. They can work within these systems as cogs in the wheel, and to be hired by the growing private sector that need to have more workers that can just get straight into the job, on the ground running. They may not need a bachelor degree. They may need a couple of micro-credentials in digital literacy, something updated to the current industry standards. So I guess that's where, Melbourne Polytechnic and this Skills Exchange come into it.
So, Tim, anyway, that's a great segue to the next question. Melbourne Polytechnic has a number of courses available on the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange. This adds to your already strong and growing presence in Indonesia. Can you talk us through Melbourne Polytechnic's offerings for the Indonesian market?
Yeah, so we have more than 30 micro-credentials that are promoted through this exchange. And these range from a number of specializations, such as seniors living, early years education, hospitality. So when you look at our micro-credentials for early years, we're talking about, upskilling, how to care for young people, how to develop independent learning. These are the kinds of micro-credentials that when you're hiring nannies, you'd want to know that they can help foster your child's creativity when you're looking after them. That's a really good opportunity for large numbers of Indonesians to get these skills. And I can tell you that some of our graduates from our hospitality program in Bali, for example, they're going off to the Middle East. So they're doing, a new model of international exchange, I guess. They complete our program in Bali, and then many of them will go over to the Middle East for work, and some will come to Australia for further study as well. So there's a dual mobility aspect there, and also many will just stay in Indonesia and work in quality hotels and so forth.
Fantastic. And to wrap up, I'd love to get both of your views on the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform, which Sondang mentioned can be accessed at IA-skills.org. And given the ramped up efforts of the future-proof the Indonesian workforce, how do you see this platform contributing to that goal? Maybe I'll get Devi to go first.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so excited with the launch of this iskills.org. I think this is the first of its kind that brings together the Australian training providers and the Indonesian enterprises. The hope is it will be able to help Indonesian enterprises in meeting their critical talent needs and building and upskilling the skills. So I really hope future collaboration can be met, and I'm also hoping that the critical talent that in the industry needs can be met through these platforms.
Yeah, and likewise, if you look at the needs for the Indonesia future skills as a jigsaw puzzle, this would be an important piece of that jigsaw puzzle. I think it's going to be an opportunity for Indonesian businesses to contact quality Australian providers that have been verified prior to being promoted on this platform, so they will have some confidence in who they're working with. And for us, it means we've got the opportunity for others to contact us, develop future partnerships, and we want to be part of the future in Indonesia. We think that Indonesia is where Australia wants us to be, and prosperity of Indonesia is great for Australia as well. And we want to see our brothers across the ditch do well. That's part of our strategy.
Fantastic.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Terima kasih Devi and Tim. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a conversation with Devi Ariyani and Tim Gilbert. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more on the Indonesia-Australia Skills Exchange platform, visit IA-skills.org. For more on Katalis, check us out on our website, IA-CEPA-katalis.org, or find us on social media. We look forward to your company on the next episode of the Katalis Podcast.
Katalis is a unique 5-year government-backed business development program that unlocks the vast potential of economic partnerships between Australia and Indonesia.